these big organizations aren't just after individual health, that they have funding, they have different ideas for how the world should work, and they
Right.
seem to want to, kind of have control over the food supply and do it their way. It's like, no, we think we need plant-based meats, or we're going to do these fake meat alternatives and cell-based meat. This is healthier. This is their idea. And I think that's why they and there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of power to be had.
Let's ditch the quick fix and dive into today's conversation.
Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Brian Sanders. Brian is the filmmaker behind the feature-length documentary Food Lies and the host of the Peak Human podcast. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in mechanical engineering. Brian works as a health coach at Evolve Healthcare and co-founded the health education company Sapien. He also works to spread the awareness of regenerative agriculture and increase access to well-raised animal products through his company, Nose to Tail. And so in that, there's different ways to get animal protein and different ways of kind of raising your own. And then there's a couple of different problems, and maybe you can address a couple of these at the same time. One is there's always going to be pushback that red meat is bad for cardiovascular health, and so that would be one pushback. And then another pushback would be, these cows, they're causing a climate change. Mm-hmm. And, you're seeing that across the planet now, where governments are playing the game of trying to eliminate the farmers' ability to raise, cows, and the myth that is associated with that, they're producing too much CO2. So the heart issue and the climate issue, if you want to tackle those.
Absolutely. This is my full-time job, is tackling these, actually. Oh man, the heart issue is a whole thing. So it's heart disease, it's colon cancer, mainly those two. So that's been debunked. There's been, luckily, I've taken so long making this documentary series that this amazing 5 studies in the Annals of Internal Medicine came out recently, less than 2 years ago, basically saying we've looked at the meta-analysis, we've looked at all the data, there is no problem with red meat. So this idea is a bit old that it's bad for you. I mean, yeah, it's been in the textbooks. It's all that your doctors say. Everyone listening is like, yeah, but my doctor says. I'm like, well, your doctor's not up on the literature. and they're not up with just simple human biology, really. And human evolution and all this stuff. We've always been eating animal foods, but luckily this 5 studies came out to say, we looked at the evidence. There is no evidence that it's bad. And a lot of the evidence that it was supposedly bad was from 2015. The WHO, the World Health Organization, put together a panel of scientists that they chose. And I actually believe that they had an agenda to blame meat for the problems and say that it's bad. And you can get into a whole history of why they would do that, or what's going on and the big interests involved. And, why it seems like a conspiracy. I'll tell you that. It's like, well, the WHO, I mean, they're just like, it's a great organization that's about world health. And
not so fast.
Not so fast. I did a whole presentation on it actually 2 weeks ago at a conference called Exposing the $1 Trillion Agenda Against Red Meat. And how much time do you have? I can scratch the surface with an hour, and I can post that presentation. But there is, and it's a lot about money. It's not all about money, but yeah. I mean, I guess I have to take this detour to kind of let people know that these big organizations aren't just after individual health, that they have funding, they have different ideas for how the world should work, and they seem to want to, kind of have control over the food supply and do it their way. It's like, no, we think we need plant-based meats, or we're going to do these fake meat alternatives and cell-based meat. This is healthier. This is their idea. And I think that's why they and there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of power to be had. And this is human nature to want to have money and power and to kind of do it your own way. And it just happens to be that there's certain people, I think, that just, this is their idea of what's going to benefit the planet. I don't think they're pure evil. I think this is their idea of how they can, control the food system, stay in power, make money, whatever it may be. It's just their solution. I don't think it's the right one, But I'll do. I'll take a break from that whole talk, and just people should know that there's a lot of money to be made in processed foods, and for their processed foods to be good, meat and fat has to be bad. And this, we kind of made this mistake around the 1950s and did some bad science, and that kind of greenlit the food industry, and everything's kind of been going down this path since then.
Do you have occasional brain fog or forgetfulness? Studies have shown that our brain has the best health at the age of 22 and deteriorates each year after that. Iso-alpha is a natural brain health supplement with over 40 scientific studies to verify it stimulates the vagus nerve and improves brain function. It uses bioavailable hops bitter concentrate to allow the nervous system to get into a flow state to release chemicals that help with hand-eye coordination, memory, and quick thinking. Iso-alpha guarantees results in 90 days or your money back. You can get this brain health formula at isoalpha.com. That is isoalpha.com. Go to isoalpha.com now to get your proven brain health formula.
And it's just really hard to undo all that knowledge. I mean, it's not even knowledge. Hard to undo all that, and that's why your doctor says that
Right.
Cholesterol is bad. Like, this is what the textbooks say. This stuff has kind of been implanted in the world's psyche, and it's hard to undo it. And okay, so I was going on a tangent about the 2015 WHO panel because a guy I interviewed, Dr. David Klurfeld, had to get special permission to interview this guy. He's a USDA PhD who just studies food, and he was on that panel, and he said, he's like, yeah, this was clearly a panel that was put together to make meat a carcinogen, to get their certain agenda across. It was a bunch of vegans and vegetarians. They all had conflict of interest. And he was kind of the one guy there that was just, he's not some carnivore guy. He's just some nerdy scientist dude who's like, hey, what do you mean? We've always eaten meat. Meat is a health food. It has great protein and nutrients, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And he brought certain studies to the table, different actual evidence to show this, and they did not use that. They ignored it. They purposely did not use it in their analysis, and they only really used their epidemiology, their more like correlational studies to try to show that, because that's all there really is to try to show that meat is bad, is that basically people who eat more meat tend to have a lot of unhealthier behaviors, and they smoke more and they drink more and they exercise less. And so it's probably, that's why they have these correlational studies.
Or correlations, yeah.
So that's what happened. And he called it out, and people can listen to my podcast about that. It's Dr. David Klurfeld, and he just breaks it down. So that's the only reason. It's really, that's the main thing, is we have the 2015, the WHO, all the vegans point to that. Oh, it's, schedule, it's a blah, 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 carcinogen and colon cancer, all this. Or that's just the old myth of the heart disease, where they just thought, oh yeah, if you eat cholesterol, you just get high cholesterol, and you eat fat and you get fat. And it's just not true.
Yeah. And then you throw at least 10, 15 years ago, cholesterol meds, statin meds are $25 billion industry, 80% of which were consumed in America and Canada. So, you've got this, revolving financial interest. And I'm with you, it's hard for me over the years. I've tried to figure out what the heck and why, but you can never know the exact thoughts of anybody. But collectively, I think I'm in agreement. I think I'm on the same page there, where it's just certain people have a different paradigm on how humanity should go from this point forward, and they'd rather see it with lab meat, and they'd rather see it with alternate energy sources and things of that nature, and and whatever their opinion is on climate change. So I have to give them that. That's again going at best. I have to say they just believe this is the best for humanity, and oh, by the way, we're going to make trillions of dollars, but that's not our
Oh yeah. It's just like, oh, that's just a side benefit. Like, who knew? So, yeah, I'll answer the second part of your question, because we're going towards the climate side environment. Right. Of course, we all want a healthy planet and a nice environment, but again, they have wildly different views of how to get there. Work. Yep. And it always just happens to be to have their highly profitable schemes, right? It's never just like, oh, well, regenerative agriculture, we can put carbon back in the soil and we can grow healthy food. Well, there's no money to be made in that. That's never the solution, because that's, millions of farmers across the world independently growing healthy animals on healthy land and improving the soil. No one makes money off that. It's super complicated to try to orchestrate. No one will ever make money other than the actual farmer doing the good work. So of course they always have some scheme. Yeah. And yeah, I love the "you own nothing and be happy." Like these people, they actually put out a video. They just went out and said it. The World Economic Forum did this, and
I'm familiar with that one.
Yep. "You own nothing, be happy." And you watch this little propaganda video and you're like, oh, that's great. Yeah, the Uber just shows up to your door. You don't have to own a car. You don't have to own a house because you just can pay rent. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. So who owns everything?
Right.
It all sounds good until you realize that you're just a serf. To go back to the days when this all started. I think this all started back just when we actually invented grains and crops and the pharaohs. It's the pharaohs and the slaves, and then it turned into the kings and the serfs. It's just
there's been that trend over history, no doubt.
It's just the dynamics have always been that way. Is people always want to accumulate power and the control, and then there's always the lower class, and it's like work the fields and just stack the grains, and then all house them and make the rules.
Right.
And that's still happening. So man, I keep going to these tangents, but you really have to know about all this stuff to understand why this is happening. Why are all the doctors wrong? Why are they still spouting out this nonsense about cholesterol and saturated fat? You have to know all this, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Because why? This is what got me. I was like, why are they so wrong on so much of the healthcare stuff, so much of the food stuff? Why is it a sick care industry where all they do is pump pills and procedures, and no one talks about the root cause or changes in diet and lifestyle? And you think the world's just backwards, and your head hurts because it doesn't make any sense until you think about it in this different paradigm of, oh, okay, there's this, it's a completely different paradigm of people trying to maintain money and control.
Yeah, and many, just to kind of go down this rabbit trail with you a little bit here, many people don't realize we're just so systematic in our approach to living. And so you're talking about that with, the farming. Who's going to benefit if the farmer, basically does regenerative agricultural, the people that buy from him and the farmer, but not the big system. And that's the same thing in the medical system. We got great doctors and nurses and caregivers and all that kind of stuff, but they're under a system. And so they're counting on the FDA and the CDC and all these different, authorities to be sending them information that's true. But just as you were saying, they don't send information that's true. They might throw together, the WHO will throw together a few things that make them look right. But when you really start digging into the studies, you go, hey, they're not even close, And so I feel bad because doctors are just in that trap. And so many other people, government people, are just in that trap. They're dependent upon the system, and they're dependent upon the studies that basically are a house of cards, as what I've discovered over the years. So again, apologize for that, but it's somewhat on top.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, there's so many good, well-meaning doctors, nurses, practitioners that they don't really know any better, and that they've been force-fed this stuff. It's kind of indoctrinated into them. Yeah, it's really hard to break free of that. So yeah, definitely no shame for all these people that are caught up in the system. Some of them have broken free too, and it's amazing.
And that's awesome.
It's amazing when they do that. Yeah. So okay, the environmental stuff. So I mean, again, we could do a whole podcast on the environmental stuff, but I guess the high level view is cows and animal agriculture are a scapegoat. It's basically a smokescreen for the real problem. Same thing with the health stuff. The real problem is all the processed foods. They try to blame it on meat to kind of divert the blame. Exactly the same thing. It's so convenient that they can do the same thing. Oh, the cow farts. Oh my God, the cow burps, the methane, they're killing the world. This is insane. This is the most insane thinking. You got to scramble your brain and just step back for a second. Be an alien looking at the earth, and you see polluting factories. You see these private jets flying around. You see giant cruise ships, circling the oceans. You see all this stuff, a million cars pumping out pollution. You see toxic factories spewing out sludge. And then you see this cow in a field. And you would have to laugh that people got so brainwashed that they thought the cow in the field was the problem. It is unbelievable that people bought this stuff. People who don't believe in propaganda, and this is proof of it. How this propaganda is so effective that it got the whole world blaming a cow burping on all the problems that are from the big industry, the oil extraction, the burning of fossil fuels, whatever it is. And they have got people believing that the cows are the problem. It's wild. A simple high-level view of why this is not true, because some people might say, oh, but there's methane and blah, blah. Okay. Well, for one, ruminant animals have always been on Earth. I mentioned the megafauna roaming the Earth, tens of thousands of years ago, 100,000 years ago, gigantic animals eating grass. Why our grasslands existed is because these animals coexisted and ate the grass and then produced manure to grow back the soil and put nutrients back in the soil. And it's an amazing system. And the world was fine. There used to be way more animals out there than we have today. Even with factory farms, which I do not agree with, we have so many cattle. There was way more, even by weight. There was, especially even if you count all the pigs and chickens, all the animals we use for food, there was far more mass of animals previously when the earth was fine and no one had a problem. It was this green tropical wonderland and everything was working great. So, okay.
That's such a good point. I hope people can really kind of grasp what you're saying. I mean, we had the volume of animal life was so different than today. Yeah. And there wasn't any CO2 problems.
There was no CO2 problem. So if you want to talk about methane, okay, so cows in a field, it produces methane. Yes, it does produce some burps. That methane goes up into the atmosphere. It does turn into CO2. It's a short-lived gas. It's a short-lived cycle. That CO2 does actually go back down and feed the plants and feeds the grass. And then they eat that grass again. And it's just this great harmonious cycle that goes on forever. Yep. And then there's a completely different system. So it's not a cycle. The problem is it's not a cycle. This is a harmonious cycle where the methane goes up and down. It's all above ground, right? It's like goes into the air, goes to the grass, goes into the cow, goes to the air, grass, cow. Then there's this whole other system of the highly extractive industries of fossil fuels and all the other ways of producing energy, which is just extractive. It's a one-way street, and you're just pulling all these different fuels and carbon and this and that out of the earth and putting it directly up into the atmosphere. This is a one-way street. It is not a cycle. It is not regenerative in any way. And that's the problem. So that's the high-level view of this. Dr. Frank Mitloehner is a great PhD that talks a lot about this. You can listen to podcasts I've done with him, presentations he's done online. It's just wild that people don't understand like the simple difference between nature and basically big industry extractive processes and why they don't see that it's a smokescreen tactic.
Gotcha. Yeah. So maybe switch gears just a little bit, but on the same kind of page, kind of just a couple more tips on what you see as would be a positive paradigm for regenerative agricultural practices.
So that's maybe people haven't heard of that. Like, what is regenerative ag? It's goes by different names. Holistic management. Alan Savory is a great resource. Some people may know it as just like grass-fed, grass-finished. I mean, that's just a simple way that people can kind of understand our rotational grazing. It's like these methods of keeping, especially ruminant animals like cows, bison, buffalo, sheep on grass. Here's a nice point. All animals, all these ruminant animals like cows spend the first 2/3 of their life on grass. So these are the cow-calf operations. That's where they're born and raised with their mom. And then they eventually would go to a feedlot. So most animals do go to a feedlot to be finished off, fattened up quickly. The other way is to keep them on grass for longer. And then you can use these techniques, especially to regenerate the land and soil by rotating them around where they are in different paddocks and they can eat the grass down appropriately, not overgrazing it, and then move to the next paddock. And then you can rotate them around. Maybe they don't even come back to that spot for a whole year. And when they get back to it, everything's regrown, right? It all depends on the ecosystem. This is all like highly dependent on what part of the world you're in and the climate and the conditions and the flora and fauna. And so that's the way to do it, where you're actually building soil health. You're putting carbon back in the soil. You're also getting super healthy animals because they're eating a wide array of forages and all these different herbs and, you know, plants and grasses and nutrients to make their meats, and, you know, we'll get all their nutrients for them and then healthy meat for us by getting all of these compounds into the meat. And there's a great guy, Dr. Stefan von Vliet, who studies this, and I've interviewed, and they use mass spectrometry and they do all this crazy stuff to see how healthy it is to eat these animals and how they have so many different secondary compounds that go around and eat the variety of forages, regenerate the land. So it's kind of like the win-win, where your soil is getting built up, you're helping water retention, right? A huge problem. If you think the opposite, it's the monocrop method of because you can grow plants and animals together, right? You can do these kind of mixed systems and have all this stuff work together, and then you can have richer soil and the soil that actually absorbs water. And then the opposite system is just monocrop landscapes. And then you can kind of picture this. I mean, I've seen this done in a live test where we looked side by side and we had equal rainfall. We mimicked it with a sprinkler, and the side that was on just a monocrop land, it doesn't soak up any of the water and it just runs off. So you're like losing the soil. There's no nutrients in the soil, and you don't absorb any of the water. So there's so much to this stuff, but you have to just realize on the high level that there's like the natural ways to do it that mimic kind of how nature has always worked. And that's what regenerative agriculture does is, you know, when there's a flood, when there's a ton of rain, for all of history, the water soaked up into the soil because it could handle it. Now, when there's a ton of rain, it's this hard packed ground, dirt really, and it just runs off, and there's all these other problems. Then then look at all these downstream effects. Then you have all these herbicides, fungicides, all this stuff on the plants. Now that's all running. You're losing all your water, and then those run off into the streams and the rivers, and now it's into the Gulf, and there's this giant polluted patch of the Gulf, and it's just filled with pesticides. It's crazy.
Right. It totally is. Boy, a whole lot there. So yeah, so I'm sure you're probably a fan of home gardens, farm to table, you know, those kinds of processes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Grow your own food, learn about it, go to your farmer's market, talk to your ranchers. You know, any city, I lived in LA, it's a concrete jungle, but there was like 4 farmers markets within striking distance of me. So yes, if you can't grow your own, you can learn about growing your own food and do it on your own, or you could go get it from local ranchers, get the eggs from the ranchers. I won't eat any eggs that aren't like the good pasture raised, eating the bugs. You know, there's a certain guy out here in Austin doing it, and once you eat this type of food, you won't go back.
Yeah, it's totally the way to go. So, you know, would love to spend just a little bit of time specifically on your documentary and the 6-part series, and maybe if you could kind of give us a little bit of a highlight on the history of Food Lies, and then where you're at with it today as you're developing the 6-part series.
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is press pause, go on YouTube, go to the Food Lies YouTube channel and watch the intro. We just made this live last week. It's a 3.5-minute intro. It took us over a year. It is amazing. I think it's a world's first on YouTube. It has over 200 comments and they're all positive. I don't know if that's ever happened on YouTube. 100% positive comments. It's tells my story. It's very well done, highly produced, high production value. We spent over a year, like I said, we handmade almost every one of these scenes, and it'll tell you about the film. It'll show you what you're in for, and everyone is so excited because we're spending so much time to make this such a special docuseries, and the world needs it. And there's enough vegan films out there, and we need to give the truth. So that's the whole goal, is, you know, kind of debunk a lot of this anti-meat agenda that's going around, this information that I think is actually disinformation going around.
Yes.
It will highlight the benefits of eating animal foods and why we've always eaten them and why it's healthy and how humans have thrived in the past. It will tell you, it will go into some of the agriculture stuff we talked about, how we can do it regeneratively and properly. it even goes back into human history and shows, well, how did our like bodies change in response to eating animal foods? Like, why do we get these big brains? And, like there's so much to the story of just biochemistry and like just looking at our physiology of why we require meat and animal fat and these great nutrients that are from animal foods that we've eaten for all of history. So it's really kind of a wide-ranging film that turned into 6 parts because there's so much to say. And I think my goal. It's like the ultimate audiovisual thesis. So like there is tons of info out there and no one is really has time to digest it all, right? It's like I've over the past 6 years of making the film, or 9 years of my journey, I've listened to thousands of hours of audiobooks, podcasts. I've gone to conferences. I've interviewed doctors and scientists. I've done so much. People aren't going to do that all. It needs to all be in one place. And I don't think there's been one good resource that's put it all together into a highly informative, highly produced, fun, just something that they could watch and get it all. Not like you're going to get every single piece of information, but you'll get all the broad strokes of everything we've talked about today plus more. And I think it'll really change the world, really, because it's such the opposite of what people have been told. But it's not, again, it's not some like extreme film. It's not a carnivore film. It's not a keto film. It's not a paleo film. Certainly not a vegan film. It's none of those. It's just giving people the actual accurate information about how the human body works and what we should eat and how we can be healthy.
I appreciate that. And how does one get the series?
So we need help. We have foodlies.org and we're on Indiegogo still. It's just me and a guy I grew up with. When I told you I grew up filming stuff and doing videos.
Right.
He actually went to film school, came back around, is making this film with me. He's amazing. Just watch the intro. You'll see how good he is. And we need help though on Indiegogo. We have a campaign. The Game Changers, which is a vegan film, James Cameron produced it, who happens to have $140 million invested in his fake food, pea protein, garbage. He has Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, big time athletes. So they spent millions of dollars, took 7 years. So millions of dollars in 7 years. We're trying to do this with just me and my buddy. And I guess that's a pitch to say that we need your help. We're trying to make this all just with our own funds, our own time. We're not getting paid for it. And people supporting it on Indiegogo. And then the idea is those people who support us, foodlies.org, you can link out to the Indiegogo. They will get the film first. They will get the series first. And then we were trying to get on Netflix to go for the biggest audience. And we have some connections and distribution companies that hope to get on Netflix and worldwide.
Cool. So the documentary series is complete. It just needs the help to get it out to the public. Or are you still in the process of completing it?
We are still in the process. We edit it every day. We are in the weeds. We are producing motion graphics. We have to pay the motion graphics guy. Me and the director editor don't get paid, but our people do. We have a custom score. We have a composer.
Nice.
We have a motion graphics guy. And it's a huge process to get every single clip. I mean, this is a big thing. It should be a multi-million-dollar project with 25 people on it, probably like a normal Netflix show would have an entire team. And we're just trying to do it ourselves.
Perfect. Yeah, and I did get a chance to see that, and it is well done, the trailer. And so I'm excited for the series too. So I would definitely encourage everyone to check that out on YouTube, as you mentioned, and try to be a part of the truth. It's a good adventure to be on for sure. Tell us about Nose to Tail, and maybe tell us a little bit about Evolve Healthcare and some of that, and how people can follow up and in those areas with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nose to Tail, briefly mentioned, that's my company that I started because I saw the value of growing well-raised meat, regenerative ag, and I didn't want to take any sponsors. So I made my own company. So we ship out this great grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised meat from Texas. We ship it out to 48 states. We have other products. We even make body care, like soap and different moisturizers out of beef tallow. and
Nice.
then also put it into biltong, which is kind of like a South African version of beef jerky. So we have amazing ways to get great meat, high quality meat that's all just whole foods, right? We don't pack it in with any extra ingredients. It is just what it is, it's meat and a little bit of spices on the biltong, and that's it. So that's at nosetotail.org. And then I also have Sapien. I work with Dr. Gary, so Evolve Healthcare in LA. And then we have Sapien, we have a program. I'm just trying to do all sides of this, work with the best people and just help people, understand health. And I get to work with patients, and I don't do so much health coaching anymore because I'm so busy with my other projects, but I had a few years where I was seeing patients, is great to really see how do people tick? How can we change their life? How do we get them to make these dietary changes? So that was a great learning experience.
Awesome. So sapien.org and Nose to Tail and Evolve Healthcare, some good opportunities to check back with you. Any final kind of one or two absolute take-home tips before we sign off?
Yeah. Oh, and then Food Lies. You can find me online, Food Lies. So I do a lot of my little tips and tricks on my Food Lies Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I try to do little memes. I guess one of my memes is eat densely, move intensely. It's like a good kind of tip. It's kind of like the opposite of eat less, move more, which is, like I said, meaningless, but eat densely, move intensely. It's kind of just a better recipe for how to live well and eat nutrient dense foods, right? If you eat densely, that means you're eating animal foods, you're eating whole plant foods that are healthy and low in anti-nutrients and prepared well. And then move intensely is, I just don't like this idea of chronic cardio. It's like, okay, let's go lose weight. Let's sit on the treadmill for an hour. I don't think that works. I think you should be playing sports or sprinting or walking. I guess that's not intensely, but walking or weights or, calisthenics or just challenging your body. And I just think that's a lot more meaningful than telling someone to eat less, move more.
No, I like it a lot. I'm a big pusher of being active, and again, going back to, you're not really that much older anatomically. If you get into certain lifestyles that include lack of activity, your body's not going to regenerate and rebuild itself as well. So I love that, to eat densely and move intensely. I think that's a great little meme there. So.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's
so let's we'll wrap it up with that. And I just really appreciate you joining us today. I know you've got so much more for people to benefit from. So I hope everybody that's listening takes that opportunity to follow up with you and maybe be a part of that documentary. I think that's going to be an awesome production from what the little bit I've seen, and then having a conversation with you. I'm excited for you and excited for that to come out. So thank you for joining us, Brian.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan.
All right, everybody, have a joyful day.